Can you refuse a police officer if he demands to see your guns in a traffic stop? That's the question every gun owner needs to know the answer to. Because how you handle this moment can be the difference between protecting your rights and creating serious legal problems for yourself. You're pulled over, maybe for a broken taillight, maybe for speeding. You've disclosed that you have firearms in your vehicle because you're a responsible gun owner. And then the officer says, I need to see those guns. Your heart's racing. You know you're legal. But what do you actually say? Can you say no? Should you say no? What are the consequences either way? I'm going to give you 10 specific tips that answer this exact question. These aren't theoretical principles. These are practical, real-world answers about what happens when an officer demands to see your firearms during a traffic stop. Let's break it down. Tip number 1. Understand that I want to see your guns might be a request, not a lawful command. Here's what most gun owners don't realize. When an officer says they want to see your firearms, they're often asking for your consent, not giving you a lawful order. The language matters. Can I see those guns? I'd like to take a look at those firearms. Do you mind if I inspect those weapons? These are requests for consent, and you can decline consent. During a routine traffic stop for a minor violation, an officer doesn't automatically have authority to search your vehicle or inspect your firearms just because you have them. They need either your consent, probable cause that you've committed a crime, or a valid legal basis for the search. So if an officer phrases it as a request, you can politely say, Officer, I don't consent to any searches. The firearms are legally possessed and stored according to state law. Now, if the officer has a legal basis to search without your consent, they'll do it anyway. But if they're asking, it means they likely need your permission. Don't give it unless you understand what you're agreeing to. Tip number 2, if it sounds like a demand, clarify whether it is an order or a request. Sometimes officers use command language even when they're really asking. I need to see those guns sounds like an order, but it might still be a request for consent. If you're unsure, politely ask for clarification. Say, Officer, are you ordering me to produce the firearms, or are you asking for my consent to inspect them? This question does something important. It forces the officer to be clear about their legal authority. If they say it's an order, ask them to articulate the legal basis. Can you tell me what crime you suspect or what the basis is for this search? They should be able to give you a reason. Officer safety, reasonable suspicion of a weapons violation, probable cause of a crime, something. If they say they're asking for consent, then you know you can decline. The key is getting clarity without being confrontational. Your tone should be respectful and calm, but you're establishing on the record whether this is consensual or mandatory. Tip number 3. Know that officer safety can justify temporarily securing a weapon, but not a full inspection. Under Terry v. Ohio and its progeny, if an officer has reasonable suspicion that you're armed and dangerous, they can take steps to ensure their safety during the stop. But here's the nuance that matters. There's a difference between an officer temporarily securing a firearm that's within your immediate reach and an officer conducting a detailed inspection of all your firearms. If you have a loaded handgun on your passenger seat or in your center console within reach, an officer can likely secure that weapon temporarily for the duration of the stop. That's a valid officer safety measure. They might remove it from your immediate area, unload it, and set it aside until the stop is complete. That's generally permissible. But that doesn't give them authority to open your locked gun cases in the trunk and inspect serial numbers, check registrations, or examine every firearm you're transporting. A temporary weapon seizure for officer safety is narrow in scope and limited in duration. If the officer starts going beyond securing an immediate threat and begins a full inspection or inventory of your firearms, that's likely exceeded the scope of what officer safety justifies. You can verbally object by saying, Officer, I believe you're exceeding the scope of officer safety, and I'm noting my objection. Tip number 4. Refusing consent doesn't give the officer probable cause. This is critical. Some gun owners worry that if they refuse to let an officer inspect their firearms, the officer will assume they're hiding something illegal, and that will create probable cause for a search. That's not how the law works. Your refusal to consent to a search cannot, by itself, create probable cause. The Supreme Court has been clear on this. Refusing consent is your constitutional right, and exercising your rights can't be used as evidence of criminal activity. Now, that doesn't mean an officer won't become more suspicious if you refuse, and it doesn't mean they won't look for other reasons to justify a search. But legally, your refusal alone doesn't create probable cause. If an officer suggests that refusing makes you look guilty, you can politely respond, "I understand, officer, but I'm exercising my constitutional rights. I don't consent to searches." Don't let implied pressure make you give up your rights. Tip number 5. If you're arrested, your vehicle can be searched without your consent. Here's where the situation changes dramatically. If the officer arrests you for anything, whether it's related to firearms or not, they can conduct a search incident to that arrest. This includes searching your vehicle and inspecting your firearms without your consent. They can also impound your vehicle and conduct an inventory search, which includes cataloging any firearms. So if the traffic stop escalates to an arrest, your ability to refuse a search essentially disappears. This is why some officers might be looking for any reason to arrest you if you've refused consent to search. An outstanding warrant, an expired license, any arrestable offense gives them the authority to search. This is also why it's critical that you're in full compliance with all laws when you're transporting firearms. Valid license, valid registration, insurance current, no outstanding warrants, firearms properly stored according to state law. Don't give them a reason to arrest you, because arrest opens the door to a full search. Tip number 6. Know your state's specific laws about firearms in vehicles. Whether you can refuse inspection of your firearms depends partly on whether you're in compliance with your state's laws. Some states require firearms to be transported, unloaded, and in a locked container in the trunk, completely separate from ammunition. Other states allow loaded firearms in the passenger compartment if you have a valid carry permit. Some states have registration requirements where you might be legally obligated to prove registration if asked. Some states have laws that allow officers to verify that firearms are legal during a stop. You need to know the specific requirements in your state and any state you're traveling through. If your state law requires you to produce proof of ownership or registration when asked, then you refusing might give the officer probable cause that you're violating that law. But if your state has no such requirement and you're transporting firearms legally, then the officer needs a separate legal basis to inspect them. This is why research before you travel is essential. Know the laws, follow them precisely, and know what you're required to show versus what's optional. Tip number 7. If the officer develops probable cause, they don't need your consent. Let's say the officer sees something that gives them probable cause to believe there's criminal activity. Maybe they smell marijuana. Maybe they see drug paraphernalia in plain view. Maybe you admitted to something incriminating. Once they have probable cause, they can search your vehicle without your consent, and that includes inspecting your firearms. This is why you need to be very careful about what you say and what's visible in your vehicle. Don't volunteer information. Don't consent to searches of anything. Keep contraband out of your vehicle entirely, because if the officer develops probable cause for any crime, your firearms become part of the searchable area even if they're not related to the crime the officer suspects. Your previous refusal to consent becomes irrelevant at that point. They'll search anyway, and anything they find, including any firearms violations they discover, can be used against you. Tip number 8. Document if the officer inspects your firearms over your objection. If you've declined consent and the officer inspects your firearms anyway, document everything. Note the officer's stated reason for the inspection. Write down exactly what they did. Did they just look at the firearms, or did they handle them, check serial numbers, photograph them? How long did the inspection take? Did they remove the firearms from their cases? Did they unload them? All of this matters for a potential legal challenge later. If you have a dash cam or can safely make audio recordings in your state, that's even better. After the stop, write down everything while it's fresh. If the officer didn't have legal authority for the inspection, this documentation is how your attorney will challenge it. But here's critical. During the stop, do not physically interfere. You can verbally object. Say, "Officer, I do not consent to this search, and I'm documenting my objection." But do not touch the officer. Do not block them. Do not grab your firearms back. Physical interference will get you arrested and charged with resisting or obstruction, and that will hurt your case even if the search was improper. Tip number 9. Understand the consequences of refusing versus consenting. Let's be practical about the decision you're making. If you consent to let the officer inspect your firearms and everything is legal, the stop probably ends quickly and you drive away. The officer verifies everything is in order, gives you your ticket or warning for the traffic violation, and you're done. If you refuse consent and the officer doesn't have another legal basis to search, the stop might still end the same way, but the officer might be less friendly about it. You might be detained longer while they decide what to do. They might call for a K-9 unit if they're suspicious, though you can't be detained indefinitely for this. On the other hand, if you consent and the officer finds something that's illegal, even if you didn't realize it was illegal, you've now consented to the search that produced evidence against you. That makes it much harder to challenge in court. So you're weighing the inconvenience and potential tension of refusing against the risk of consenting to something that could hurt you. If you're absolutely certain everything is legal, consenting might be the path of least resistance. But if there's any doubt, refusing is the legally safer choice. You can't unconsent after they find something. Tip number 10, know when you need an attorney and get one immediately. If this traffic stop results in your firearms being seized, you need an attorney right now. If you're charged with any firearms violation, don't say another word to anyone until you have legal representation. If the officer inspected your firearms over your objection and you believe it was an unlawful search, consult an attorney about challenging it. And not just any attorney. You need someone who specializes in both firearms law and criminal defense, because this is where those areas intersect. These cases are technical. Whether the stop was legal, whether the search was justified, whether your rights were violated, these are complex questions that require expertise. Many gun rights organizations can refer you to qualified attorneys. Some attorneys offer free consultations. Make that call as soon as possible after the stop if anything went wrong. Time matters because evidence needs to be preserved, dashcam footage needs to be obtained, and legal motions need to be filed within specific timeframes. Don't wait days or weeks. Don't try to handle this yourself. Get professional legal help. So let's come back to the original question. Can you refuse a police officer if he demands to see your guns in a traffic stop? The answer is, it depends on whether it's actually a lawful demand or just a request, and whether the officer has legal authority to search without your consent. In many routine traffic stops, you can refuse, but you need to be respectful, you need to know your state's laws, and you need to understand when the law requires you to comply versus when you can decline. The key takeaway is this: know the difference between a request and an order, clarify which one you're dealing with, understand the legal basis that allow searches without consent, and be prepared to politely but firmly assert your rights when they apply. Your Second Amendment rights and your Fourth Amendment rights both matter. You can protect both if you know what you're doing. And remember, the goal isn't to win a confrontation on the side of the road. The goal is to handle the situation legally and safely. Protect your rights without escalating the encounter, and deal with any legal issues later in court with an attorney if necessary. That's how you preserve your rights and your freedom. Stay informed, stay legal, and handle these situations like the responsible gun owner you are.